All right, boys and girls, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk about Biomechanics 201. So we are essentially going to take off from the last series, which discussed stability, mobility, and biomechanical efficiency, or as I like to call it, SME. And that comes from my background in the military where, SME is an acronym we use a lot for subject matter expert. In this case, we're going to use it for stability, which is stability of the joints, mobility, which is also mobility of the joints, and then efficiency by learning how to essentially put stability and mobility together to create a biomechanically efficient golf swing. And again, if there are joints that are stable that should be mobile and mobile that should be stable, your golf swing is not going to be efficient, so you have to fix those areas first. Now, when I'm explaining this concept to my newer students, they always say, well, that's great knowledge to have, but how do I do it? And again, that comes back to understanding biomechanics and the fact that the first 6 inches of the golf swing are absolutely the most important. So, in other words, if I set up with mobile hands, my fingers are mobile, everything's I'm able to use everything, and then I have stiff wrists, right? So I'm kind of just picking the club up with my hands. The next thing is I'll have a mobile elbow, right? Stable shoulder, etc. So in order to get it right, we have to understand that first and foremost, our joints, all in our hand should act like clamps. They should be stable. Thus, the wrist would be mobile. Elbow would then be stable, which gives us that straight left arm that we always see. Shoulder is then mobile. Rib cage is then stable. Spine is then mobile. Hips remain stable, right? Knees mobile. Ankles stable. Feet mobile, right? We want our feet to be mobile so that we can allow the ground underneath us to manage itself. We allow our feet to manage all that. So how do we train that? Well, first and foremost, we have to get the grip right. For those of you that are watching my channel, you understand how important the golf grip is now and why it's the first piece to building a proper golf swing. So the first step in this process is pretty simple, and that is basically identifying which joints should be stable and which joints should be mobile. And luckily, because the way the body works a very specific way, this is extremely easy. For every joint that's stable, the next joint in line should be mobile. And since this is a full body movement, in order to coil and uncoil, you have to have a series of joints that are stable and mobile in unison. So in other words, if our ankle joint is stable, knee joint needs to be mobile. If our knee joint is mobile, hip has to be stable. If our hip joint is stable, our spine has to be mobile, right? It just goes up and down and through. Shoulders, elbows, wrists, fingers, all that stuff. Every single joint in the body has to have a stability function and a mobility function that are tied together in order to use the body in a biomechanically efficient manner. And yes, they absolutely have to. And this is from TPI certified, Greg Rose and others that basically have identified how the body moves biomechanically, which says it's almost like a universal law at this point, is that for every joint that's stable, you need a joint on both sides that are mobile to prevent injury. So let's use an example to discuss this. And something I see a lot in amateur golfers and recreational golfers is the bent left elbow. So if you have a mobile left elbow, right, and a stable wrist and a stable shoulder, you're going to have some biomechanical deficiencies in your swing that are basically going to cause your arm to go around your body, but your spine won't move. Because if you think about it, if the shoulder has to be stable, Then the shoulder blades, the rib cage has to be mobile, which means the spine now has to be stable, which means you will lack turn, right? Pretty simple, and you can't avoid this. This is how the body moves. So I'm going to basically turn my elbow into a mobile elbow. I'm going to let it bend. I want you guys to notice how my body changes the approach to swing. Notice there was no turn. The club basically lifted and slammed into the ground, i.e. no power, no biomechanical efficiency. So now that you understand that, we have to talk about how to train it. So your homework, if you're so inclined, is to make some golf swings, evaluate your golf swing, and find out which joints are mobile and which joints are stable. So there's an old saying, you don't know where you're going until you know where you're starting. So first we must understand where we're starting from to get where we're going. So for the next couple weeks, I want you guys to take some videos of your swing. I want you to evaluate them and tell me, or at least tell yourself, where you need work. And then in the upcoming videos, which I'll be releasing to members, I'll teach you how to fix all these areas. All right, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. The homework, if you're so inclined, is to take video of your swing and try to find out where you have the wrong joints that are stable and the wrong joints that are mobile. From there, you can start adopting mobility principles and or stability work, i.e. lifting weights, these types of things, or doing physical therapy exercises to build these areas so that when you're swinging the golf club, your joints automatically act properly because you set your hands on the club right, you verified that your wrists are mobile, elbows are stable, right? Everything else is working properly, and then you can just swing the golf club.